Right, Conflict by William Blake. It's in the Conflict AQA anthology, yeah, and in the Edexcel one, I think. So, I wander through each chartered street, near where the chartered Thames does flow, and mark in every face I meet, marks of weakness, marks of woe. In every cry of every man, in every infant's cry of fear, in every voice, in every band, the mind-forged manacles I hear. How the chimney sweepers cry, even blackening church, every blackening church appalls, and the hapless soldier's sigh runs in blood down palace walls. But most through midnight streets I hear how the youthful harlots curse, blast the newborn infant's tear, and blast the newborn infant's tear, and blights with plagues the marriage hearse. Okay, so that is a poem by William Blake. It's very, very negative, isn't it? It's a very negative view of London. If you look at the things over here on the board, I've got 10 points to approach a poem. If you want to write them down. So the 10 points are... And you can approach any text with these 10 points, especially any poem. And when you're asked to compare, say, for example, London with Ozymandias or London with the Charge of the Light Brigade or Exposure or Remains or Poppies, the Emigre, Tissue, Checking Out My History, John Agard, he's great, John Agard. Okay, so you've got the 10 points, right? The 10 points are language, imagery, subject matter, message, tone, form, structure, literary devices such as onomatopoeia, alliteration, repetition, caesura, which are pauses, yeah. So any sort of literary devices you may notice. Imagery obviously is similes and metaphors, and personification. Rhythm and rhyme, that's obviously in a poem. If you're using the 10 points to approach a normal text, a prose text, you wouldn't need rhythm and rhyme. But to be honest, a lot of prose texts have rhythm and rhyme in them as well. And finally, point of view. Right, is that 10 points? Language, imagery, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yes, it's 10. Look, language, imagery, subject matter, message, tone, form, structure, literary devices, rhythm, rhyme, and point of view. Form and structure is one as well, the shape of it. There's 10 points. Golly.
There's 9.
Hang on. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Oh, I didn't count language because of the weird squiggly thing.
Okay. What, this one?
Yeah.
Okay, well, language is the most important thing, obviously, because it's what's written in language. Okay, so when you look at the language, you talk about, it could be colloquial, which means as people speak. It could be very formal. It could be in slang. John Agard, actually, here, later...
Oh, sorry.
Go on.
You know this anthology, you're allowed to take it with us in the exam?
You are, okay. But were you allowed to put writing on it?
Yeah.
You're allowed to put writing on it?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yeah. That's why we're allowed to, that's why we brought them in to help us.
Well, then you need to note this then, don't you, with what I'm talking about. Okay. You usually can't take the anthology.
Yeah, no, it's like, because it's an end of year exam.
Oh, because it's an end of year exam.
It's not a GCSE.
Oh, it's not a GCSE.
It's like we thought it was.
No, I knew it wasn't actually. Okay, so you're doing a practice exam, you're allowed to take your notes in.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so if I look at John Agard here, he's this guy. Dem tell me, what dem want to tell me? Banj up with me eye with me own history, blind me to me own identity. Dem tell me about 1066 and all that. Dem tell me about Dick Whittington and all cat. But Toussaint Louverture, no dem never tell me about that. Toussaint, a slave with vision, licked back Napoleon battalion and first black Republican born. Toussaint de Thorn, de French, Toussaint de Bacon of the Haitian Revolution. That's obviously in Creole or Pidgin English, basically. This is a guy who's come from one of the Caribbean islands, and he's writing in English poetry in his own vernacular, his own way of speaking. He's actually really great, and you know, when we do look at it in that in more detail, you can look at him on YouTube reading it out. I don't read it out very well, but that language, you'd have to mention that. Okay. So if you look at, so you can write notes on this now then. So I wander through each chartered street near where the chartered Thames does flow, and mark in every face I meet marks of weakness, marks of woe. In every cry of every man, in every infant's cry of fear, in every voice, in every band, the mind-forged manacles I hear. Excellent. How the chimney sweepers cry, every blackening church appalls, and the hapless soldier's sigh runs in blood down palace walls. But most through midnight streets I hear how the youthful harlots cursed blasts the newborn infant's tear and plights with plagues the marriage hearse. Now, if you're going to write about a poem, you should read it up to 10 times, okay? Which is why I keep reading it now. And I'm getting a feel for that poem by reading it out loud, right?
Yeah.
I'm just literally doing it off the top of my head. But you can look at GCSE Bite Size on here. And GCSE Bite Size by the BBC is very, very good. All right? And it will give you all the answers. But okay, so what do you notice from the 10 points? Because each poem will have something very, very special about it. Some poem will have repetition. Some people will have imagery. Some people will have a really amazing shape to it, a form or a structure. It'll be a sonnet that's very, very rhythmic. So what is the ingredients of this poem?
Well, I think
you've got some notes on there, haven't you? So what did your teacher tell you?
that the writer has Jamaican dialect.
What? We're looking at the wrong poem. We're looking at. Well, you're supposed to be looking at the London.
Oh, London. All right. Okay. Sorry. I was in the wrong one. Because you're reading that one, so I thought it was that one.
No, I was just trying to talk about language there. We're talking about John O'Garden, his Jamaican dialect. Yeah. It's called, I think it's called Creole. It's a mixture of English and sort of his own dialect. Anyway, go on. So, I wander through each chartered street near where the chartered Thames does flow, and mark in every face I meet marks of weakness, marks of woe. So I actually think what I have to say about this poem...
Rhythm and rhyme.
Oh yeah, it's got a lovely rhythm. Street, flow, meet, woe, man, fear, ban, here, cry, appall, sigh, walls, here, curse, tear, has. Excellent. It's got a very rigid rhyme scheme. Why? Okay, it's got a rigid rhyme scheme because it's sort of saying that we're all trapped. And so the rhyme scheme indicates being trapped, really, I think. Isn't it? It's saying that, you know, that basically...
So it's like, I wrote down, like, people unable to think.
Yeah, they're all trapped, yeah, in a sort of...
The city has brainwashed them.
That's absolutely good. Yeah, they're trapped in a way of thinking that's not good for them, isn't it? Yeah? Okay. So that's one thing we notice, is the rhyme. And so basically that links in with the rhythm and rhyme, basically, okay?
Yeah.
And it's very regular, okay? So the rhythm, the rhyme is the ending, the rhythm is okay? And basically, I think it might be iambic pentameter, but I'm never sure on rhythm. I'm not so good at that. Anyway, it's definitely got a very regular rhythm, hasn't it? And that's all you probably need to say at this point. Okay. So, where is that then? Okay, I'll just go back to that and do it off the top of my head. So basically, here you've got repetition all the way through in every cry, in every impulse, every voice. Okay, so all the way through you've got repetition. Did you just have that down there?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what's the meaning of that? It says what's the meaning of that? Why has it got repetition there? Why has he done that? It's boring, isn't it? Well, actually, I don't think it is. I think Blake's one of my favourite poets. Actually, it's not boring at all. It's brilliant. But why does he repeat it?
Because it makes them think that the city has brainwashed them.
Yeah, good. Yeah, okay. So what else?
Also loads of imagery.
Yeah, what's the imagery?
It's like the mind-forged manacles are here.
Yeah, what does that mean?
Like the dreams. Well, I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, manacles are they're what prisoners have on, manacles. You know, they're sort of like handcuffs. Okay, so write down manacles are handcuffs basically. Manacles, yeah, they're sort of, we're bigger than handcuffs actually. Manacles, I think, are these great heavy metal things actually, to be honest. You know, like they had in the olden days. Because this poem, how old is this poem?
19. Oh, no, not 19. 1780s or something.
Yes, it's hundreds of years old, yeah, absolutely. But nothing's changed, actually. His message here is that the city seems to be doing a disservice to the people who live there, doesn't it? Yeah, they're having they're trapped in this awful situation, yeah? And so if you look, what's a harlot?
A harlot, I'm not sure.
The youthful harlot are prostitutes.
Oh, right, okay.
Okay, so write that down, they're prostitutes. So basically, men are buying prostitutes for 14-year-old girls and 15-year-old girls and 16-year-old girls. They're youthful because they want, obviously, young women, okay? And so this is terrible, isn't it? You know, sexuality is a joyful thing. You have babies and you get married and, you know, it's part of the joy of creation. But here are these girls selling their bodies. In today's society, that people are being trafficked from Eastern Europe and from India and from Nigeria and from all over the world into the UK, and people are buying girls of that age. It's not something that obviously happens. It happens all over the world. Harlots, you know, men buy prostitutes, basically, 14-year-old, 15-year-old girls. So he's commenting on something that is hundreds of years ago, but it's actually still happening today. Okay? And so that's terrible, isn't it? That tells us that human nature hasn't really changed, actually, right?
And like when it says on the last line, with plagues the marriage hearse.
Yeah,
is that oxymoron?
How's that an oxymoron?
I don't know, I wrote that down.
I know. Plague is an image that basically gives a disease, and the marriage hearse. Oh yeah, the marriage hearse. Yeah, that is an oxymoron because marriage is usually a carriage of joy, and a hearse is a funeral. Yeah, so that's an oxymoron. Yeah. So why are the prostitutes plaguing the marriage hearse?
Because. Wait, so. Is it because they have babies or something?
No, I think it's because in those days, if you had sex, you got diseases, very serious diseases. So basically, they'd go and have sex with prostitutes, and then they get a terrible disease and bring it back to their new wife.
All right.
Okay, so that's how it would plague the marriage hearse, definitely. But even in today's society, you can get AIDS from sex, and you can also get sexual diseases that can plague the marriage. Also, if a man is obviously going to a prostitute, it's going to plague the marriage anyway, because it means that, you know, he's kind of a bit, he's putting his energies in the wrong place, and he's also not very nice because he's exploiting people. Underage girls or women, you know, because women who are selling sex are often very, very disadvantaged. It's not people who've got a good education and things don't sell sex, really. I mean, some people argue they do, but I don't think they do. I think some men would argue, yes, they do, they enjoy it, but I don't think that's the case.
They only do it for, like, the money.
Yeah, that's right, yeah, and a lot of them are drug addicts, or a lot of them have been trafficked. People have told them, oh, come to England, we'll give you a passport, we'll look after you, and then they get here, their passport's taken off them, and they're actually locked in rooms, in a cage. I've got someone who works for the trafficking charity in London, one of my friend's daughters, and it's shocking. I'm absolutely furious about it, actually, and so is Blake 300 years ago. He's not blaming the prostitutes. He's not saying it's their fault. It's not their fault, is it? No. It's the men who are using them, and it's the society that's allowing that to happen. It's not those poor prostitutes' fault. And maybe it's not the men's fault. They should really try and gain control of their mind.
Yeah.
So Blake is you know, pointing out something that's really terrible and, you know, is still going on today, really. So basically, if you look at the 4 stanzas, so you've got, as under the under form and structure, you've got 4 stanzas, right? And it's a snapshot of going through London, basically. So he starts on the streets, and when I say I wander through each chartered street, see that language? Chartered sounds posh. If you're a chartered accountant, it sounds like you're posh. So it sounds like you're going to have this really, very organised, professional thing. And so you start thinking, I'm wandering through each chartered street in London, marvellous, London's such a marvellous place. And then he sort of says, no, it's not. And he says the chartered Thames does flow, basically the Thames is sort of, that's a different meaning of the word chartered, which means mapped or chartered. Yeah. Okay, so he's very clever, Blake. He's using chartered in 2 different ways there. If you want to underline those, do you want me to use my pens to underline?
No, you'll need.
You need colours. Underlining colours is much more interesting. Let me get some colours. So he's using chartered in 2 different ways, basically. So that's the language. It's very innovative, and it also catches you out because you think, he's going to be praising London. And mark in every face I meet, marks of weakness, marks of woe. And so there's a repetition of mark in that line as well, right? So if I say the subject matter is it's snapshots as he's going through London. So take a yellow pen and say sort of snapshots. It's a bit like he's looking in the people's faces. He's looking at he's looking at the church and the chimney sweepers, and actually it's the people. The institutions, actually, the church, the soldiers, the palace. And then he's looking at night and he's seeing this awful...
What shall I use the yellow pen for?
Just to say each stanza goes through a different aspect of London.
Okay.
And the second stanza seems to be talking about... hearing, actually. He's very, very good, Blake. You can actually look at him I was actually going to post this one on my Facebook page, but I thought it was a bit too miserable.
So what was right again? So each stanza goes... into
a different aspect of London and the people that live in it. Doesn't it?
Yeah.
So the first one is, in the first one, I wander through each chart. So he's walking along and he's marking in every face I meet. So he's looking, right? Yeah. And he's seeing weakness and woe. And the next one, he's hearing it in every voice, in every ban. The ban is sort of when you read the bans out for a marriage. Actually, he's actually hearing misery and he's hearing the mind-forged manacles is very, very important. The mind-forged manacles means that when we're brought up, you see. If you're brought up, he doesn't believe in Christianity, basically. He thinks the church is bad. He thinks that basically the church is telling people a very rigid set of rules, that it's actually slightly putting them in a prison. And that actually, when you really need to love God and love other people, you can do it in the fields, you can do it on the street. Love is everywhere. It shouldn't just be in a church. Yeah. And he believes that the rituals, going every day, or, in the case of the Muslims, praying 5 times a day or whatever, those things are constricting, and he thinks actually they should be part of the way we live. I tend to agree with him, actually. And so basically, when he writes a poem about a church, basically, and he says it is beautiful, beautiful wood like we've got over there, ancient forest like we've got over there. And he says that, they're going to build a church there and it's going to be ruined because the wood was a great praise to God and the church isn't. You can see that, can't you? Yeah. So he's quite radical because he not only thinks that, he says it. And people got really annoyed when they didn't like him because every time his poem was saying, how great is Britain, he's saying, there's a bit of a problem here. So mind-forged manacles is basically saying, you're trying to live within what the church is telling you or what the state is telling. So, for example, you've got mind-forged manacles. Do you know what your mind-forged manacle is?
Or in what sense?
Well, your schooling, you're told that you have to get GCSEs, and if you don't get them, you won't be successful and happy. That's a mind-forged manacle.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Right. So he's saying society is imposing these very strict... And I'm a teacher, and I think, personally, that it's dangerous to keep telling children that because it's not even true. People can not have GCSEs and still be hugely successful, and people can have all the GCSEs in the world and not be successful. It's too simplistic.
Yeah.
And so I'm saying to my own students, it doesn't matter what you got. Just what
That's
you
literally, that's the pressure that I have on me all the time. That's what Mum will say to me, saying that you need to do well in these exams.
Yes, well, that's a mind-forged manacle. And obviously your mum's worried about you, of course, and that's what she's doing. But she's imposing a very strong manacle on you.
Yeah,
and the school is too, right? And so Blake is saying, this isn't true, actually. You know, you can actually become very successful and happy and give something to society without these rigid rules. And I actually agree with that. And when I teach, I try to say to my students, it's all right for you. For people who are very, very academic, it's not a problem. They're going to do well in the exam, and that's fine. But it's the ones who aren't, does that mean they're useless and losers, according to the mindful? No, it doesn't. It means that they're going to find their own path and probably more innovative, creative and successful because they've had to have tried harder and worked harder to connect to people and stuff. So Blake sees all this. Okay, so when he's talking about mind-forged manacles, he's saying that, you know, society's putting these kind of rigid rules onto people and it's crushing them. Nothing's changed. So, but also, in those days, they used to put little children up the chimney, which he's very angry about. Blake is very angry about chimneys. He used to put 6-year-olds up to the chimney. They used to in that era. And because they were little, they could get up there and clean it. And they were sort of underfed and they often died and they were the poor children. That's terrible, isn't it? Yeah. But in today's society, in India, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, in many countries in the world, we are buying stuff from Primark and paying people £1 a day. I know for a fact in Turkey they're using Syrian refugee children to make clothes because they can. They're desperate for money. So the world hasn't really changed. People are still exploiting children.
Yeah.
All right. So people say, oh, this is hundreds of years ago. We're not using chimney sweeps anymore. No, but you're buying stuff from Primark for ridiculously cheap. Who can possibly afford to live on that money? So we're all as guilty of it. That's another thing. So, right, so basically what else have we missed out? So we've done the rhythm, we've done the literary devices. So we've done the imagery, mind-forged manacles, a lovely alliteration there as well. If you underline the alliteration, underline that. And yeah, the fact that chimney sweepers, church, soldiers, palace, he's got all of them there, hasn't he? He's got the rulers, he's got the army, he's got the church, he's got the ordinary people there, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Right, okay, so...
Things I actually like, this could be one of the poems that I might have to do.
Yeah, I know. And if it isn't, you choose if you're one you compare it to. So okay, so what's the conflict in this? Because it's a silly exam, you've got to pretend there's conflict, so you've got to compare it to another poem. He's in a conflict with his own society, isn't he?
Yeah.
That's the conflict. He's saying, I don't agree with what you're saying. And you know that John Agard one I just read briefly, he's in conflict with the way that his black culture hasn't been taught. He again is in conflict with his own society, actually. Okay, so, you know, each of them, so he's in conflict with his own society. Others may be in conflict, like you do the Charge of the Light Brigade, that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, they're obviously in conflict with some real enemy, aren't they, there, in the middle of a war, aren't they? Is it the Crimean War? So you can compare it with that as well, but that's totally different. There's lots of ideas for comparison. But use these 10 points. Isn't the Charge of a Light Brigade celebratory, isn't it?
I'm not sure.
Doesn't at the end of it he say, oh, aren't we so brave?
It says, when can their glory fade? Oh, the wild charge they made. All the world wondered. Honour the charge they made. Honour the Light Brigade. Noble 600.
Yeah, so he's celebrating conflict. And he's celebrating this whole idea of violent war. Yeah? So you can compare this, totally different to this. He's actually criticising society and institutions like the palace, which he says has got all the soldiers' blood on it, which it has. And he's saying, oh, read that out again, that line, the Charge of the Light Brigade.
When can their glory fade? Oh, the wild charge they made. All the world wondered. Honour the charge they made. Honour the Light Brigade, noble 600.
Yeah. all that repetition, honour, 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 noble. He really likes them. He thinks they're absolutely great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it compares really well with this Blake poem where, you know, it's the opposite. One is celebrating conflict and the other one is saying, oh, you know, you're actually, you know, you're imprisoning us in mind-forged manacles.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, if I just read out this GCSE bite size here to see anything we like, the language is at times biblical. And it's as if he's speaking a prophecy of the terrible consequences unless changes are made in the city. The city is symbolic of all man's cities, not just London, though. It isn't just Londoners who are like that. If you go to any city that's based on making money, it's exactly the same, even today, isn't it? New York and all of them is all about, you know, exploiting certain people and putting other people in. There's very few cities that are even really it's a society actually, not just the city. London's symbolic of Western society. Well, not even Western society. Most societies in the world tend to behave like that, don't they? So it's biblical. So if you look here, he talks all about the repetition, which we've talked about, haven't we?
Yeah.
And the poem ends with a very startling concept. So it's got a really amazing ending, Marriage Hearse, you're absolutely right. So the ending of that is like, you know, the marriage hearse is the way towards death, basically.
Yeah.
Whereas the other one, that Charge of the Light Brigade, it's got a very startling ending too, but completely the opposite. It's celebrating the institutions of the army. This is challenging marriage, which is an institution. And you can challenge marriage, of course. So, you know, there's all different ways of living. Marriage is an old-fashioned one, but he was married, Blake. He was married throughout his entire life to a lady called Catherine. He was madly in love with her. And yeah, they tried to have children, but they couldn't. But I think he's not looking at his own marriage. He's looking at the fact that a lot of times marriage fails, and he knows he didn't have divorce or anything. Did you imagine if you married the wrong person, you couldn't get divorced? Sometimes it's very unlucky, and you think someone's different to what they are, or that people change, or they get mentally ill, and then it is a marriage hearse, isn't it? If you can't get out of it. Yeah, and there's lots of cultures where you are stuck in a marriage, and that can be very problematic for people. So, yeah. So he's kind of very modern in a way. That's why people didn't like him. They didn't like the fact he said these things in the 70s. He wasn't very popular, but now he's the only poet really that's really, really visionary and celebrated. Okay? So he's kind of outside of his time. You can call him a visionary or a prophet. He was kind of like a visionary. People, okay, so it means that he can see things that other people can't. So he's saying the future brings nothing but death and decay. It's like a song. Can you put it's like a song?
This is the whole of the poem.
Yeah, it's like a song, yeah. He always writes like a song, like nursery rhymes. The reason he does that is he tries to write it so everyone can understand. He doesn't want people not to understand. He feels really strongly that people should understand what he's saying.
Yeah.
Because if people had listened to him all those years ago, maybe the world would be an improved place, but he was only one voice, wasn't he? So let's have a look at what else we can say. Subject. We'll talk about Blake. We need to talk about Blake a little bit. He specialised in illuminated texts. He did the most wonderful drawings that went with these texts that I really love, and I'll show you one in a minute. Amazing drawings where he usually have a person. You know, when you kind of become enlightened, and you kind of understand the world. Some people do, and some people don't. And you know, Muslim peers and patisars and scholars, Jesus. He was kind of one of those. He could see things that other people, it's called enlightened. And so he basically was bathed in this sort of light of knowing. And so he does these most amazing pictures. Muhammad was enlightened, of course, as well. Something came to him. Did something come to him in a cave, Muhammad? Was he in a cave when?
No, I don't know. I think so.
Yeah, he was like a very ordinary person, Muhammad, not really very educated, and basically he got enlightened, and Blake said he was born understanding things that a lot of us either take years to understand or never understand. He rejected establishment religion for various reasons. One of the main ones was a failure of the church to help children in London who were forced to work. Blake lived and worked in the capital and so was arguably well placed to write clearly about the conditions of people who lived their faith. Yeah, he was really unhappy when he saw the chimney sweeps. He was furious. What happened to the chimney sweeps and to the children? He was always writing about the children, saying, "Oh my God, how can you do this to them?" And obviously lots of children died, and there was the very, very rich people and the very, very poor people. And you know, he was very conscious that we should be looking after the poor because we're all God's children. It's a religious way of looking at the world, which actually all religions have. We should look after everybody, not just people, the greedy, materialistic, rich types. We should look after everybody because everyone's got their own gifts, haven't they? It's published in 1794, and it's to show the two contrary states of the human soul. Oh, it's from the Songs of Innocence and Experience. You want to write that down? This is from the Songs of Experience, and it illustrates the effect of modern life on people and nature.
For this, from London?
Yeah, it's from the Songs of Experience, and it wants to show the effects of modern life, dangerous industrial conditions, child labour, prostitution, and poverty. But, you know, none of these have changed, have they? At this point, there's a French Revolution around this time in 1789, and Blake thought that perhaps ordinary people should indulge in a revolution, and he was toying with the idea that the people were so let down by the rich people that they should get involved in a revolution. And he's kind of hinting at this now. He's kind of stoking the flames.
Yeah.
The trouble with revolution is, it means revolution means to go around and come back to where you started. That's the first problem with revolution. And the second problem with revolution is it's often very, very violent, and it's so violent it destroys what it sets out to do. Because if you look at Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a Buddhist monk who I love, and Martin Luther King as well, and they say, and Gandhi, they all say violence only creates violence. So if you want a revolution, you must have a peaceful revolution of love. If you start... Under the French Revolution, they sawed in every town. They sawed the rich people's heads off.
Yeah.
Do you know about the French Revolution?
Not really, no.
Yeah. Well, they saw people's heads off, and Blake. I mean, I sometimes feel like I shouldn't really say this on video, but I feel like, and obviously I wouldn't dream of it, but I felt like there is a possibility of sawing Trump's head off because he's dangerous. But obviously I wouldn't do that because violence begets violence, so I must mindfully meditate and be kind and loving.
Yeah.
But sometimes you feel tempted, you know, and obviously I know that's not the way forward, and you must look at that mindfully and say, but there is a strain, and there was this terrible revolution that, and if you look at the pictures on the internet, you can see, you know, there's hundreds of pictures of French people chopping off their rich people's head, and the same in Russia. They did it to Russia as well. And in the end, if you carry on taxing and treating people badly, ordinary people, like us, basically, to be honest, in the end they will have a revolution, and the best thing is not to behave like that to them so they don't feel like having a violent revolution. You must try and not exploit people so that they don't get that bloodshed.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Blake, I don't think... He was interested to watch the French Revolution, and it was a model for how ordinary disadvantaged people could seize power. But, I mean, I'm not sure... I don't know how far he went with that, because it's not exactly a very good idea, and he was a very loving man. So a visionary. So I don't think I hope he wouldn't carry on with that visionary, that revolution idea. Although it's tempting. Right. Okay. So So here you've got a sample question here. You haven't got on Westminster Bridge, have you?
No.
Let's have a look at your list of what you could compare it to. Let me have a look. Blake uses a caesura in line 4 to reinforce the impact of city life on the people living here. A caesura is a pause, basic. 1, 2, 3, 4. So marks of weakness, pause, marks of woe. That's to really try and make us understand the marks and to hear them. the tone, we didn't talk about the tone is incredibly negative, right? And if you compare it, okay, to, there's lots of sounds, the result of the anguish and pain caused by conditions in the city. If you compare it to the Charge of the Light Brigade, which is totally opposite, it's got sounds. Do you know the Charge of the Light Brigade? Shall I read it out to you?
Yeah, I've already read it.
So, half a league, half a league, half a league onward, all in the valley of death rode the 600. Forward the Light Brigade, charged for the guns, he said. Into the valley of death rode the 600. Forward the Light Brigade, was there a man dismayed? Not though the soldier knew someone had blundered. Theirs not to make reply, theirs not to reason why, theirs but to do or die. Into the valley of death rode the 600. So this is a celebration of a ridiculous situation whereby the leaders sent them into the jaws of death. Do you know that? It sent them down this valley, and in fact there's another army waiting for them. And it's cannon to the right of them, cannon to the left of them, cannon in front of them, volleyed and thundered, stormed out with shot and shell, boldly they rode, and well into the jaws of death, into the mouth of hell rode the 600. So this is a terrible poem about people being sent to their death. Yeah. But this guy seems to be celebrating it. How horrible.
It is quite, yeah.
I'm going to just Google it to check he's not doing this ironically, but I don't think he possibly can be. And that's even more grim. He's not doing it kind of, Flashed all their sabres bare, sabres with their sort of big knives. Flashed as they turned in air, sabring the gunners there, so they're sort of stabbing the gunners. Charging an army while all the world wandered, plunged in the battery smoke, right through the line they broke. Yeah, the Cossacks and Russians reeled from the sabre stroke, shattered and sundered. Then they rode back, but not the 600. So again, you got repetition to emphasise how many died. Got repetition. And lots of lovely rhythm and rhyme there, because what you've got is the sort of horses galloping down the valley. I'll just finish it off. Cannon to the right of them, cannon to the left of them, cannon behind them, volleyed and thundered. Stormed at with shot and shell, wild horse and hero fell. They that had fought so well came through the jaws of death, back from the mouth of hell. All that was left of them left of 600. So he's saying that, basically there's hundreds and hundreds of them have died. And this is by Alfred Lord Tennyson, 1809 to 1892, The Charge of the Light Brigade. And he's writing, the British here are riding into the Cossacks and the Russians. Mm-hmm. Some things never change, do they?
No.
Anyway, when can their glory fade? All the wild charge they made. Oh, the wild charge they made. So it's, they're sort of like, oh, goodness, what heroes. All the world wandered, honour the charge they made, honour the Light Brigade, noble 600. So you've got, the rhythm, the rhyme, the tone, descriptive language. The language is repetition, but it's actually describing just the battle, isn't it?
Yeah.
Volley, cannon, 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 flashed, sabres. The point of view, it's just a celebration, isn't it? By Alfred Lord Tennyson. Of course he wasn't there dying, was he? He's just celebrating them. So you can compare that to those two very usefully. One completely opposite to the other. One going along with the dominant ideas of army and death and, dying for your country. And the other one saying, not sure about this. We feel like we're mind-forged manacles. Very useful. You could also... we're going to run out of time. No, we have got another 10 minutes. All right, then. So, are you happy with that? Do you think you'll be able to understand that now and do that?
Yeah.
So, I don't think we need to go over the Charge of the Light Brigade again, do we?
No.
So, let's choose another one you'd like to go over in there.